My brother had been sucking up to our rich uncle for years, but the reading of the will revealed who had really earned his inheritance. For 15 years, Dalton had devoted Uncle Crenan to his greatest hobby. Every holiday was a performance. Expensive wines, thoughtful gifts, endless flattery of his business genius. Dalton would drive 4 hours each way just to mow Uncle Crenan's huge lawn, then stay for dinner and nod enthusiastically at the army stories we'd all heard a dozen times. "You need to come visit more often," Dalton would lecture me after each trip. "Uncle Crenan is always asking about you. He's worth 12 million, Ezra. 12 million. And he has no children." I always brushed him off. Uncle Crenan reminded me too much of my father. The same calculating look. The same way of making you feel worthless with a single comment. When our parents were killed in that accident, Uncle Crenan had swooped in like a vulture, managing their estate and letting us know exactly how much we owed him for his generosity. "He's testing us," Dalton insisted, "playing favorites to see who really cares." But I'd done my own math. Uncle Crenan was a bitter old man who enjoyed watching people grovel before him. Whatever legacy he'd left behind wasn't worth spending my weekends pretending to worship. Meanwhile, Dalton had redoubled his efforts. He remembered Uncle Crenan's birthday, sent Christmas cards, even named his son after him. When Uncle Crenan mentioned wanting to try golf, Dalton immediately signed up for lessons. When he complained about his housekeeper, Dalton's wife began cleaning his house weekly. "You're making a huge mistake," Dalton warned me last Christmas. "He keeps talking about updating his will. Do you think your pride is worth millions?" Last month, Uncle Crenan had a massive heart attack in his sleep. At the funeral, Dalton wore his most expensive suit and gave a moving eulogy about the loss of his mentor and father figure. He spoke of Uncle Crenan's wisdom, his generosity, his indispensable guidance. I sat in the back row watching the performance. The will was scheduled to be read yesterday. Dalton arrived with a leather briefcase and his accountant, ready to discuss tax implications and estate planning. He had already researched Uncle Crenan's Porsche and begun looking at downtown penthouses. The family attorney, a stern woman named Ms. Rivera, cleared her throat and began reading from a thick document. "To my nephew Dalton, who has devoted so many years to visiting with me and seeing to my needs." Dalton sat up straight in his chair, practically beaming with anticipation. "I leave my complete collection of antique fishing lures and tackle boxes valued at approximately $400. The color drained completely from Dalton's face. "To my nephew Ezra, who has maintained his integrity and refused to participate in this obvious manipulation." My stomach dropped to the floor. "I leave my entire estate, including all real estate, business investments, vehicles, and liquid assets totaling 11.7 million. Dalton jumped out of his chair. "That's impossible. I was here every week. I took care of him. I sacrificed everything." Mrs. Rivera handed me a sealed envelope with my name written in Uncle Crenan's distinctive handwriting. Inside was a letter that made my hands shake. "Ezra, your father always said you were too proud for your own good. I have watched Dalton's obvious greed for 15 years, respecting your principled distance. The inheritance includes assets Dalton knows nothing about. Check the safe in the basement behind the furnace tomorrow night. The combination is your mother's birthday. What you find there will change everything you thought you knew about our family." I couldn't fit what happened next into that short video. Watch the rest below. I drove home during the day. Uncle Crenan's letter was burning a hole in my jacket pocket. 1.7 million. The number kept bouncing around in my skull like a pinball. My phone was constantly vibrating. Dalton was calling, texting, probably having a complete breakdown somewhere. I ignored them all. I couldn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about my mother's birthday. March 15th, 1953. 03. 15. 53. What could Uncle Crenan have hidden that was so important? And what did he mean by it would change everything I thought I knew about our family? The next evening, I waited until it was dark before driving to Uncle Crenan's house. I still had the spare key from when I'd helped clean out his refrigerator after the funeral. The massive Tudor mansion stood empty and dark, its Gothic windows staring at me like judgmental eyes. I'd only been in the basement once, years ago, when Uncle Crenan had asked me to help move some boxes. It was a wood-paneled space with fluorescent lights that cast an eerie yellow glow over everything. The stove dominated one corner, a huge metal beast that had probably been installed sometime in the 70s. Behind it, just as Uncle Krenin had described, was a wall safe I hadn't noticed before. It was painted the same beige as the panels, perfectly camouflaged. My hands shook as I typed in Mom's birthday. The lock clicked open. There were 3 items inside: a thick manila folder, a small wooden box, and a VHS tape with Ezra written on it. Watch this first. I stared at the VHS tape. Who the hell still had a VCR? Then I remembered seeing one upstairs in Uncle Krenin's office, probably left over from the 90s. I grabbed it and headed upstairs. The tape was old and scratched, but the image was clear enough. Uncle Krenin appeared on the screen, sitting in his leather chair, looking straight into the camera. He was thin and weak. It had been recorded recently, probably just weeks before he died. Ezra. His voice crackled from the TV speakers. If you're watching this, you inherited more than money. You inherited the truth. He paused, coughing violently for nearly 30 seconds. Your father and I weren't just brothers. We were business partners, and ours wasn't exactly legit. My blood turned to ice. For 40 years, we ran one of the most successful money laundering operations on the East Coast. Casino profits, drug money, political bribes. If it was dirty, we laundered it. Your father was a street guy. I ran legitimate businesses that laundered everything. The room began to spin around me. The night your parents died. It wasn't an accident, son. They were murdered. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I couldn't process what I was hearing. Uncle Krenin leaned forward, his eyes boring into the camera. Your father wanted to leave. He believed in Jesus, started going to church, talked about coming clean, said he couldn't look at you boys anymore, knowing the blood money was paying for your educations. The people we worked with didn't believe in pensions. Hot tears streamed down my face. I know what you're thinking. Why didn't I protect him? Why didn't I warn him? Uncle Krenin's voice broke. I tried. I begged him to be smart, but Thomas was always as stubborn as a mule, just like you. He sat back, suddenly looking all of his 78 years. The accident report will say mechanical failure. Brake lines cut by road debris. But I know better. I've lived with that knowledge for 22 years. Watched you boys grow up knowing I could never tell you the truth without putting you in danger. The recording paused briefly as Uncle Krenin fought to compose himself. The folder contains the evidence, names, dates, financial records, photographs, everything it takes to bring down the entire network. In the wooden box is what your father left for you boys, what he asked me to keep safe until you were old enough to understand. Uncle Krenin stood, stepping closer to the camera. Dalton can never know this. He's weak, Ezra. He'd sell his own grandmother for the right price. But you're like Thomas, too damn principled for your own good. That's why I'm trusting you with this. The image flickered as Uncle Krenin adjusted something off camera. You have 3 options. Take the money and burn the rest. Pretend this conversation never happened. Live your life knowing the truth but doing nothing about it. He held up 2 fingers. Option 2. Go to the FBI. Hand over everything. Watch a dozen crime families collapse, but know that you'll spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder. These people have long memories and longer scopes. A 3rd finger went up. Option 3. Use the evidence strategically. Play the game. Take it apart, piece by piece. It's dangerous as hell, but it's the only way to truly win. Uncle Krenin walked back to his chair and slumped down. Whatever you choose, know this. I loved your father more than my own life, and I've spent every day since he died trying to figure out how to make it right. This inheritance isn't just money, son. This is justice. This is revenge. This is everything your father died for. The screen went black. I sat in Uncle Krenin's office for 3 hours, staring at the blank television screen. Then I opened the manila folder. The contents made me physically sick. Pictures of my father shaking hands with men I recognized from newspaper articles about organized crime. Financial records showing millions of dollars flowing through Uncle Krenin's construction company. Detailed records of bribes paid to judges, police commissioners, city council members, and at the bottom of the stack, a copy of the accident report from the night my parents died. Someone had highlighted one line in yellow. Preliminary investigation suggests possible mechanical failure, but conclusive evidence destroyed in subsequent fire. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely open the wooden box. Inside was a letter from my father's handwriting, and next to it, something that made my heart stop. My mother's engagement ring, the one she was wearing when they died, the one that should have been buried with her. The letter was dated 3 days before the accident. My dear boys, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And Crennan has finally worked up the courage to tell you the truth. I'm sorry. More sorry than you'll ever know. The money that paid for your baseball uniforms, your school trips, your college applications, it all came from blood. I told myself I was providing for my family, but really I was just feeding my own greed. I was trying to get out. I was trying to do the right thing, but some mistakes follow you to the grave and beyond. That engagement ring is yours, Ezra. Your mother always said you'd know what to do with it when the time came. She believed that you had your grandfather's moral compass, the one that always pointed toward justice, no matter the cost. Dalton is weak. Protect him from this knowledge. But if you choose to act on what Crennan told you, know that I'm proud of you. Know that everything I've done wrong, you have a chance to make right. Love always, Dad. I held my mother's ring up to the light. It was just as I remembered it. A simple single diamond that caught the light and cast rainbows across the wall. She'd let me play with it when I was little, fascinated by how something so small could create so much beauty. Now it was like I was holding proof of my own parents' murder. My phone rang. Dalton? Ezra, what the hell is going on? Ms. Rivera isn't returning my calls. I'm hiring a lawyer to contest the will. This is insane. Uncle Crennan was clearly suffering from dementia. No sane person would... Wait, I said quietly. Wait, what? Fighting for what's rightfully mine. I've invested 15 years of my life in this relationship. I earned this inheritance. Wait, I said to Dalton. Something in my voice must have gotten through to him because he fell silent. I'll call you tomorrow, I said, and hung up. I spent the next week going over everything in Uncle Crennan's files. The money laundering operation was even more extensive than his video had suggested. Shell companies, offshore accounts, legitimate businesses used as fronts. It was a complex network that had been operating for decades. More important, I discovered that it was still operating. Uncle Crennan's death had created a power vacuum. Various crime families were already vying for his territory, his connections, his business. They assumed his secrets had died with him. They were wrong. I made my choice on a Tuesday morning, sitting in my kitchen with a cup of coffee and looking at my mother's ring. I called the number Miss. Rivera had given me for the manager of Uncle Crennan's estate, a guy named Vince Torino, who ran the day-to-day operations of a construction company. Mr. Torino, this is Ezra. I think we should meet. We agreed to meet at a diner 40 miles outside of town. The kind of place where no one asks questions and the coffee tastes like it was brewed in 1987. Vince was exactly what I expected. 6 feet tall, gold chain, expensive suit that couldn't hide the shoulder holster under his jacket. Kid, he said, sitting down in the booth across from me. I have to admit, I was surprised when Crennan left everything to you. We all thought it was going to be your brother. Yeah, well, Uncle Crennan was full of surprises. Vince laughed, but his eyes were cold. Exactly. So, what can I do for you? Want to sell the construction company? I've got some buyers already. Actually, I want to expand it. That got his attention. Expand how? I leaned forward, lowering my voice. I know what Uncle Crennan's business was really doing. I know about the money laundering operation, and I know it's been without a leader since he died. Vince's hand moved slightly toward his jacket. These are very serious allegations, man. Not allegations, facts. I pulled out one of the financial statements from Uncle Crennan's files. This is from 2019. $15 million in cash over 6 months, all structured to avoid federal reporting requirements. Proceeds from the Sanchez family casinos, if I'm reading the codes correctly. The color drained from Vince's face. Where'd you get this? Uncle Crennan was meticulous. He kept records of everything. I put the paper back in my jacket. The question is, Do you want to keep working, or do you want to watch it all fall apart while the families tear each other apart? Vince looked at me for a long moment. You're either very smart or very stupid, kid. I can't figure out which. Smart enough to know that chaos is bad for business, and stupid enough to think I can do anything about it. He smiled, the first real emotion I'd seen from him. Krenin always said you were dangerous. Said Dalton was all looks and no substance, but you're the kind of guy who could slit someone's throat and smile. Uncle Krenin said a lot of things. So what exactly are you suggesting? I took a deep breath. That was it, the point of no return. I propose we consolidate everything under new leadership. My leadership. Uncle Krenin's network, but streamlined, cleaner, more efficient, less violent. And what makes you think the families will go along with that? Because the alternative is war, and war is expensive. Vince considered this, drumming his fingers on the Formica table. You do realize that if you're playing me, if this is some kind of trap, you're a dead man. If I were trapping you, would I be sitting here talking to you? He laughed again. Fair point. Okay, kid. I'll set up a few meetings, but you have to understand, these people don't give second chances. You better know what you're doing. I know. I was lying. Over the next month, I met with representatives from 5 different crime families. Each meeting was a delicate dance of implied threats and careful negotiation. I had to project a confidence I didn't have, navigating conversations where one wrong word could get me killed. The breakthrough came during a meeting with Sophia Marcelli, who had been running the family's operations since her husband's conviction on federal racketeering charges. She was in her 50s, impeccably dressed, with eyes that could freeze blood. Your uncle was reliable, she said, cutting into her steak with surgical precision. 20 years, never a problem, never a leak. But you're the unknown variable. Unknown variables can be an asset, I replied. No one sees them. She smiled. Ambitious. I like that. But ambition without experience usually ends in bloodshed. I pulled out the folder I'd prepared especially for this meeting. I've spent the last month studying every aspect of Uncle Krenin's operation. I found inefficiencies, places where money was lost, where risks were unnecessarily high. I have suggestions for improvement. Sophia opened the folder and her eyebrows rose. Digital currency integration, cryptocurrency exchanges, blockchain obfuscation. She looked at me. You understand this technology better than Uncle Krenin, better than any of his competitors. That was actually true. I'd spent 3 years working in fintech before Uncle Krenin died, specializing in digital payment systems. It was knowledge I never expected to use for money laundering, but life has a twisted sense of humor. Show me, Sophia said. I spent the next hour showing her a complete overhaul of the money laundering process. Instead of relying on cash-heavy businesses like Uncle Krenin's construction company, I proposed a network of cryptocurrency exchanges, digital wallet services, and blockchain-based transactions that would be virtually impossible for federal authorities to track. This could increase efficiency by 60%, I concluded, and reduce federal exposure by more than 90%. Sophia closed the folder slowly. If this works, you can revolutionize the way we do business. It will. And if it doesn't, you'll have one less problem. She laughed, a sound like broken glass being swept up. I'll recommend that the consortium accept your offer. But understand, boy, this is not a trial run. You will succeed or disappear forever. Got it. 3 weeks later, I was officially running a $12 million money laundering operation. Dalton still thought I'd inherited a simple construction company and a few real estate investments. He'd stopped contesting the will after his lawyer explained how impeccable Uncle Krenin's paperwork had been, but he still called occasionally to complain about the unfairness of it all. You could have at least made me a partner, he whined during one particularly miserable phone call. I mean, I almost raised Uncle Krenin's kids if he'd had any. The will was very specific, Dalton. The will was... You know it, and I know it. What I did know was that Dalton was weak and greedy, and exactly the kind of man who would kill us both if he knew the truth. Uncle Krenin was right about that. But Uncle Krenin was wrong about something else. He thought I was like my father, too principled for my own good. He didn't understand that I had learned other lessons from our parents' deaths. I wasn't interested in redemption. I wasn't looking for justice. I wanted revenge, and I was playing a much longer game than anyone realized. The upgrade project was a huge success. Within 6 months, I had increased the consortium's money laundering capacity by exactly 60%, just as I'd promised Sophia, while simultaneously reducing their federal exposure profile to almost zero. Cash transactions were largely eliminated. Paper trails disappeared into the encryption of the blockchain. Federal investigators found themselves chasing digital ghosts. More importantly, I was building a comprehensive database of every person, every transaction, every crime that had passed through my network. Names, dates, amounts, methods, everything. I was building the most detailed criminal intelligence file in American history, and I was preparing to burn it all. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. I would spend 2 years making myself indispensable to the consortium. I would streamline their operations, increase their profits, and earn their complete trust. Then I would turn it over to the FBI, but not before I made sure every single person responsible for my parents' deaths was eliminated. It all started with Vincent Torino. I discovered through Uncle Kren's files that Vince was actually the one who rigged Dad's brake lines. He'd been paid 50 grand to make it look like an accident. The orders came from Antonio Sanchez, but Vince was the one carrying them out. 3 months into my operation, I arranged for Vince to be caught in a federal sting operation targeting an entirely different crime family. I provided the FBI with detailed financial records showing that Vince was laundering money for the DeMarco family, a rival consortium that was trying to encroach on our territory. Vince was arrested at his daughter's wedding reception. He died in federal custody 3 days later, officially a suicide, but in reality, he was murdered by DeMarco associates who thought he might talk. There is one. Antonio Sanchez was next. The old man had retired to Florida after ordering the deaths of my parents, living in a beach mansion and pretending to be a clean-cut businessman. I spent 6 months building evidence against him, using his own financial records, payments to hitmen, bribes to the police, detailed accounting of every hit he'd ordered over the past 20 years. But I didn't turn it over to the FBI. Instead, I leaked it to Hector Ruiz, a rival crime boss whose brother Sanchez had killed in 1998. I made sure Hector realized that Sanchez had been siphoning money from their joint ventures for decades, stealing millions that were supposed to be split equally. Sanchez was found floating in Biscayne Bay 2 weeks later, his throat slit from ear to ear. 2 of them. By the end of the first year, I had eliminated 4 of the 7 people directly responsible for my parents' deaths. The other 3 had died of natural causes in the decades since, leaving me without satisfaction but nonetheless delivering justice. The consortium members regarded me as a prodigy, a criminal mastermind who had revolutionized their business and eliminated their enemies with surgical precision. They were grooming me for higher positions in the network. They talked about expanding into European markets, South American connections, Asian partnerships. They had no idea they were building their own death row. Dalton, meanwhile, had switched from complaining about the will to trying to please me with his success. He'd heard from family friends that I was doing well with Uncle Crennan's businesses, and he started calling with offers of investment and partnership. I was thinking, he said during one particularly irritating conversation, maybe we should pool our resources. I have some connections in the pharmaceutical industry that could really complement what you're doing with construction. What exactly do you think I do with construction, Dalton? Build, fix things up, make money. He paused. Look, I know you think I'm just bitter about the inheritance, but I'm trying to get over it. We're family. We're supposed to work together. Family. The word tasted like poison in my mouth. I'll think about it. I lied. Really? That's great. I actually have this proposal I've been working on. It involves government contracts, infrastructure projects. There's serious money involved, Ezra. Serious money I could almost hear him licking his lips over the phone. Send me the details. What Dalton sent me was a crude scheme to get into municipal construction contracts using inside information he'd gotten from his wife's cousin, who worked in the city planning department. It was a small-time anti-corruption scheme that would have netted maybe $200,000 while exposing us to enormous federal liability. It was also exactly the kind of stupid, greedy move that would attract the attention of every federal investigator within 1,000 feet. That's interesting, I told him the next time we talked. But I think we need to scale it up, to make it worth it. Scale it up how? Meet me for dinner tomorrow night. Luigi's on 5th. We'll work out the details I spent that day making sure every aspect of Dalton's life was documented and recorded. His bank accounts, his mortgage payments, his wife's shopping habits, his children's school expenses, everything. At dinner, I laid out an expanded version of my municipal corruption scheme. Instead of pursuing individual contracts, I proposed creating a network of shell companies that would dominate the entire municipal construction market. We would bribe city council members, planning commissioners, budget administrators, everyone involved in the process. This could make us $50 million in 5 years, I told him, watching his eyes light up with greed. 50 million? Damn it, Ezra. How do we do that? Carefully, methodically, and with complete irrefutability. What I was actually proposing was a federal conspiracy case that would send Dalton to prison for the rest of his life. Every conversation recorded, every meeting documented, every bribe tracked. But I made sure Dalton thought he was the mastermind. For 6 months, I guided him through increasingly serious criminal activities, all the while maintaining a careful distance from anything that could be linked to me. He recruited corrupt officials. He structured bribe payments. He set up shell companies. I merely provided advice and connections. When the FBI finally moved in, they uncovered a conspiracy involving 12 city officials, 18 shell companies, and more than $30 million in fraudulent contracts. Dalton was identified as the ringleader based on his own phone records and financial transactions. He was arrested at his son's baseball game. As we were escorted, he screamed that it was all a mistake, that he was just following my advice, that I was the real criminal. But the FBI had no evidence linking me to any of this. As far as they could tell, I was a legitimate businessman who had been swindled by my greedy brother. Ezra, Dalton shouted as he was loaded into a federal vehicle. You did this to me. You set me up, I watched from across the parking lot, wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap. Our eyes met for just a moment. I smiled. Dalton got 25 years in federal prison. His wife divorced him after 6 months. His children changed their last names. His house was seized as the proceeds of crime. 3 to go. With Dalton destroyed and the original killers eliminated, I was ready for the final phase of my plan. I had spent 2 years building the most detailed criminal intelligence database in American history. I had financial records, communications intercepts, photographic evidence, and personal testimony that could bring down every major crime family on the East Coast. I also had my mother's wedding ring, which I had carried in my pocket every day for 2 years. A ring that was supposed to point me to justice. A ring that instead pointed me to something much darker. I met with FBI Special Agent Caroline Henley on a Tuesday morning in March, exactly 24 years to the day after my parents died. Agent Henley was an organized crime specialist with a reputation for building flawless cases against impossible targets. Mr. Morrison, she said, shaking my hand in the parking lot where we'd agreed to meet. I understand you have information on criminal activity. More than information, I have evidence. Names, dates, financial records, everything you need to prosecute the largest organized crime ring in American history. Her eyes narrowed. What kind of evidence? I handed her a single folder containing only a small portion of what I'd gathered. Sample documents, financial records showing cash transactions totaling over $2 billion, intercepted communications proving conspiracy charges against 47 people, photographic evidence of murder, extortion, and political corruption, spanning 6 states. Agent Henley opened the folder and her mouth dropped open. How did you get this information? Does it matter? It does if we're going to use it in court. I pulled out my phone and showed her the video. I was sitting in Uncle Crennan's office 2 years ago, discovering a safe behind the stove. My uncle left me information about criminal activity he was forced to participate in. I spent 2 years gathering additional evidence while working undercover. It wasn't technically a lie. I was undercover. I just wasn't working for law enforcement. Undercover for who? For myself. These people killed my parents. I wanted justice. Agent Henley studied my face for a long moment. And now you're ready to hand it over. I'm ready to watch them burn. She smiled grimly. I think we can make that happen. The next 18 months were a whirlwind of federal raids, grand jury hearings, and plea bargaining. 47 people were arrested on federal charges ranging from money laundering to conspiracy to commit murder. The investigation, dubbed Operation Bloodline, became the largest organized crime bust in FBI history. Sofia Marcelli was sentenced to life in prison without parole. The entire Sanchez organization was dismantled. Uncle Crennan's construction company was seized as the proceeds of crime, along with all of his other businesses. I testified before 3 separate grand juries and was placed in federal witness protection for 6 months while the trials went on. When it was all over, I had a new identity, a new social security number, and a bank account containing $6 million that the federal government allowed me to keep as a reward for cooperating with witnesses. I also had my mother's wedding ring. I moved to a small town in Oregon where no one knew my story. I started a legitimate consulting business, helping small companies manage their accounting and investment portfolios. I bought a house with a garden where I could grow tomatoes and peppers like my mother had. For the first time in my adult life, I was completely alone and completely free. 3 years later, I received a letter forwarded through my old lawyer, federal prison mail, postmarked Dalton Correctional Institution in Pennsylvania. Ezra, I know what you did. I know you planned this all along. I know you ruined our family, my life, everything I worked for. You used Uncle Crennan's death as an excuse to become just like the men who killed our parents. Do you want to know the difference between you and them? At least they owned up to who they were. You're still playing the victim. When I get out of here, and I will, I'm going to tell everyone the truth about who you really are. I'm going to make sure the whole world knows that Ezra Morrison is nothing but a monster who destroyed his brother for money and revenge. I hope you're happy. I hope it was worth it. I hope you think about what you've become every single day for the rest of your worthless life. Dalton. I read the letter twice, then burned it in my fireplace. That night, I sat on the back porch watching the sunset fall over the Oregon mountains. I pulled my mother's wedding ring from my pocket and held it up to catch the dying light. It still threw rainbows across my hand, tiny shards of beauty in the growing darkness. Dalton had been right about one thing. I had become just like the men who had killed our parents. I had learned their methods, embraced their ruthlessness, mastered their utter indifference to human suffering. But he was wrong about everything else. I wasn't pretending to be a victim. I wasn't pretending to be anything. I was exactly what Uncle Crennan's inheritance had made me. A man with unlimited resources, no moral compunctions, and a very long memory of injustice. The tomatoes were starting to ripen in my garden. I put my mother's ring back in my pocket and went inside to plan tomorrow's work. Some inheritances bring money, some real estate, some the family business. Mine came with the knowledge that justice and revenge are often the same thing, viewed from different angles, and sometimes the most valuable thing one can inherit is the freedom to choose which angle is preferable. The last laugh, it turned out, belonged to Uncle Crennan after.